Okay, okay, Mickey? Great. So I'm going to do a share screen. And what we're going to do is we are going to, let me get to the beginning here. We are going to look at the way the Zohar influences our lives through the medium of mitzvot. We'll start with Shabbat. So here, I think we can begin with you, Jack, if you don't mind. Would you start to read from line 4? Shabbat in the Torah. But Jack, you're going to have to unmute.
So how does Zohar affect our...
Shabbat, the Torah, marks God's creation of the world in Shmos 20, the exodus from Egypt, Volume 5, and is designated as a Brit between God and Israel, Shmos 31. The practice of Shabbat in Scripture is almost entirely defined by desisting from labor, malacha, although the concept of taking delight in the Shabbat, Oneg Shabbat, is mentioned once in Yeshaya 58.
Good. Okay. So when most of us think about Shabbat, Orthodox Jews, Fruma, Abgehitene Yidden, we think about what we must not do. Okay? We start with Machot, 39 Avot Melacha, and this is a day where we have to be very careful not to turn on lights, not to take the bones out of our fish, okay? Not to clear the pips, the old black pips from the watermelon, and etc., etc. So day of Isur Melacha, principally. In Talmudic and Midrashic literature. Caroline, do you like to read in English?
No, I prefer not.
Great. Okay, then we respect your preference, certainly. David, you're next. Okay.
In Talmudic and Midrashic literature, the sages developed the concept of malacha to a great extent, and it became the centerpiece of Shabbat halakha. In terms of its sacred side, the sages made sundry observations such as Shabbat is equal to all the other mitzvot.
So Chazal said nice things about Shabbat, okay? It's equal to all the other mitzvot. David, please, Jerusalem.
Jerusalem was only destroyed because of Shabbat desecration, and Israel will only be redeemed through the merit of Shabbat. In the Gemara, various places, Oneg Shabbat is given a practical form by means of Shabbat lights, kiddush over wine, 3 special meals, and fine garments.
So we do talk about Oneg Shabbat, but again, it is taken over by the halachic mind. What is Oneg Shabbat? Well, it's Shabbat lights. When do you light them? How do you light them? What time can you light them? All these things preoccupy us. When we talk about Kiddush, how much wine do you have to have in your becher? Do you have the very big becher? Can you have a very small becher? Which becher did the Chazon Ish use? Which did the Meshech Chochmah use? How do you hold it? When do you stand up? When do you sit down? So again, we're into the halachicization of things which are actually meant to be oneg, just nice and pleasant. 3 meals, how much do you have to eat? Do you have to have a motzi for sulah sheshit? And fine garments, etc. Okay? But the main body of Shabbat preoccupation for frum Jews is what you can't do. That's how it goes. So, David, continue, please.
Yeah. Shabbat is also the day for Torah study and immersion in spirituality. Preparing for Shabbat is highly spiritualized, and the rabbis would welcome it as they would a bride to her wedding.
Rabbi Chanina, mi'ataf v'kai apanya. Rabbi Chanina would put on a nice robe, and he would go in the evening. Panya is the evening. The Mali Shabta of Erev Shabbat, Amar, and he would say, Bo v'neitzei likrat Shabbat hamalka. Let's go out and meet Queen Shabbat. Rabbi Yanai lavish mane Mali Shabbat. Rabbi Yanai would put on a special garment on Erev Shabbat, and he would say, Boi chala, boi chala. So there are aspects of Shabbat that are over and above Isur Melacha in the Gemara. That's the short point here. Ian.
I was just going to say, it's not just halacha, it's a chagiga for minhagim as well. That added to the osher.
Correct. Yeah. So we do have that as well. But mainly, we're concerned with halacha, okay? I also tend to halachicize those things that are actually technically anchored in oneg, okay? There is a somewhat literary and allegorical side. These rabbis in the Talmud who would put on special garment and say, welcome Shabbat, Shabbat is a bride, but it's a very small section compared. Look at Masechet Shabbat, one of the longest Masechtot in Shas. They're all about Melacha, okay? Now, Bernard.
Yes.
Would you like to read from line 18, the holiness of Shabbat?
The holiness of Shabbat is at the same level as that of divine sanctity, and the holiness of Israel from Seder Eliyahu, Kedushat HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Kedushat Shabbat, Kedushat Shel Yisrael.
Shloshtan Shabbat Be'achad. They're all equal.
All Israel receive an additional soul, the Neshama Yetera, at the beginning of Shabbat. The Gemara states that Shabbat is a 60th of Olam Haba and a simulacrum of the hereafter. Shabbat completed the work of creation. It has been prepared by God and was destined to become the partner of Israel in the world. According to Shabbat, Kol HaMitpaleh Be'erev Shabbat V'omer V'yichulu Ma Lehakatuv Alav Ki'ilu Na'aseh Shutaf LaHakadosh Baruch Hu B'Maaseh Bereshit.
So all this is a collection of nice things about Shabbat, okay? So there is this strand in the Gemara and in the Midrash. It's very, very general. And I don't know that we study the Neshama Yetera in Masechet Shabbat. We say that there is, but what is the Neshama Yetera? What does it mean? So what I've said here or tried to present as background is that we are concerned mainly with the halakhic aspects of what you do not do. We do talk about nice things in relation to Shabbat, but whether they're in great detail or well, they're not really in very great detail. And you'd have to look hard to find in the Talmud an explication of any of these things. So this brings us to the Middle Ages. Okay. Michael, are you happy to read in English?
Not so much, thank you.
Good. Okay, I'm going to spare you. You're not.
Try.
Although Rabbi Yehuda Levi.
Yeah, although Rabbi Yehuda Levi refers in his poems to the joy of Shabbat and to its role in connecting the soul to God.
So I'll give you the name, the titles of two poems. Yakar Yom HaShabbat Tagdil Al Ahavatcha Eshte Gvi'i. Celebrate your love, I'm going to drink a full cup. Yehuda Levi was into love poems, wine poems, in the Islamic mode of his time. But in his Kuzari, which is his philosophical work, you're not, please continue, in his Kuzari,
he adopts a purely instrumental approach which emphasizes the possibility of resting from demanding physical work, which is therapeutic, necessary, and provides an opportunity for national solidarity and Jewish dignity in a gentle world.
Gentile world, Olam Shelo Yudim. You'll remember that the Kuzari was written by Yehuda Levi in the form of the presentation of a Jewish rabbi to a non-Jewish king, the king of the Khazars, and it convinced him not to become a Muslim, not to become a Christian, but to become a Jew. Now, how does he present Shabbat? Yehuda Levi doesn't present Shabbat in the poetic way or the oneg way or the way we've talked about as the exception. He talks about it in terms of a rational approach. You have to be able to rest from hard physical work. in order to become a rested person and a better person, to feel better. And we will go to the synagogue, we'll become solid with other Jews, and we also feel dignified in a non-Jewish world. Shabbat gives us an opportunity to feel proud as Jews. Okay, so it's not very spiritual. Maimonides
also mentions relief from weekday toil as a reason for Shabbat, but adds a theological dimension, namely the doctrine of creatio nihilio.
Which means creation out of nothing. We celebrate the fact that God created the world out of nothing. So there's a theological aspect to it. And also the idea of a day of rest. We should be spared from hard physical work every day of the week. This is an important Jewish contribution to the history of the world. Now I'm going to read the next bit because it's all in Hebrew. I'll tell you a little about Rabbi Yaakov Anatoli. The rationalistic approach is well illustrated in the following citation from Rabbi Jacob Anatoli's Malmad HaTalmidim. Now, Malmad HaTalmidim is a book written by Rabbi Jacob, who lived from 1194 to 1256. He was a great translator of Arabic texts into Hebrew. And because he translated Arabic, especially Ibn Rushd or Averroes, into Hebrew, Christians understood Hebrew, translated the works of Greek rationalist Aristotelian philosophers from Hebrew into Latin, and that's how they got access to the works of the Arabic theologians and thinkers. Same with the Moreh Nevuchim. When Shmuel ibn Tibbon translated the Moreh Nevuchim from Arabic into Hebrew, Christians took the Hebrew version and they translated it into Latin. The Jews were the great translators of the Middle Ages, allowing Arabic learning, mathematics, science, and astronomy. And I think of Ptolemy now and the Almagest, from Arabic to Hebrew into Latin. And that's how they amassed the knowledge and the sophistication of the Muslim world at the time. And chief amongst the translators was Rabbi Jacob Anatoli. Okay, so much so, it was so famous that the emperor, Frederick II, Holy Roman Emperor, invited him to Naples, and he translated a huge amount of Arabic science and philosophy into Hebrew. And he was, by the way, the son-in-law of Shmuel ibn Tibbon, who translated the Moreh Nevuchim from Arabic into Hebrew, and the Kuzari from Arabic into Hebrew. So he joined a family of translators. And of course, Shmuel ibn Tibbon, his father-in-law, influenced him to be a Maimonidean.
Friends know about our channel, and it will help them as well. Okay, remember I said I'll give you a couple of bonus tips for creating your own skies? Here they are. Tip number one.
Where is that coming from?
Sky, try to get the horizon as close.
Does anybody know where the noise is coming from? Okay, perhaps it stopped. All right, so Shmuel ibn Tibbon influences Yaakov Anatoli.
To make a good sky replacement,
can we please mute everybody? Michael, sorry. Mickey, can we mute everybody?
I am trying.
Okay. Thank you. Would everybody mute? Except for me, of course. All right. So we were talking about Yaakov Anatoli, influenced by his father-in-law to become a rationalist Maimonidean. Okay. And he was an extreme Maimonidean. Everything in the Torah is an allegory, stands for a highly developed philosophical idea. Nothing is to be taken literally. And Christian Bible scholars also followed his lead. And he's the king of allegorists. Everything has a philosophical underpinning and deep meaning. So let's read his famous book, which he wrote for his sons, two sons, called Malmad HaTalmidim, which is either to teach the Talmidim, or Malmad is also a goad. That's a stick, a prong used to make cows and cattle move. Okay, so there are always two things. When you are teaching young, you've got to push them, and you've also got to provide them with something nice. So it's carrot and a stick, and that's reflected in the title Ma'amad HaTalmidim. Line 34, Lefi she'en kol adam panui lilmod kol zmano. He says Shabbat. Shabbat is there for us to learn. We don't have enough time to learn in the week. We're busy earning a living. קבע השם להם זמן וקידש את יום השבת, כדי שישמעו הכל ביום ההוא התורה ודברי, שישמעו הכל ביום ההוא התורה ודברי חכמים. Shabbat's the day for Torah study. והתבוננו ביום ההוא כראוי להתבונן ולהחזיק בקדושה. Holiness, שאין קידוש אלא על הדרך הזה. By learning. לא שהקידוש ההוא בשליטת המלאכה. It does say that simply desisting from work doesn't make you holy. What makes you holy is Torah study. Intellectual Torah study. Lo shakidush gam ken b'tikun hasuda. Eating and drinking. It's not going to make you holy. You've got to study and learn and be philosophical. She'en hazman b'atzmo muchuban rak hanimshach hakara. The day itself, the physical day, is not that important. לאותו יום מיוחד הוא פנוי להתבודד בו, להתבונן במעשה השם ולשבת בביתו. It's there to sit in God's house, to dissociate yourself from the physical world, and to rise in the intellectual and the spiritual. ואין הכוונה בשתיית יין בקידוש השמחה בעצמה. We don't want to drink wine at Kiddush just to feel happy, okay, and to get a high. אבל כדי שירחיק האדם מן השכרות. Actually, it's there to keep us away from getting drunk. שאילו לא היה לאדם זמן לשתות יין, Judaism fixed a time for people to drink. Had they not done so, יום יום שותה ומשתכר, you would have drunk alcohol and become shikah every day. אבל אחר שיש לנו יום ידוע לקבוע סעודתו על היין, ינוח יצרו בשאר הימים. That means you won't be a drunkard because you know that you can have your alcohol on Shabbat. Now, this idea is thought to be a modern one. As I said, Anatoly lived mainly in the 13th century, and he already knew this. So quite an advanced psychologist as well, okay? But nevertheless, the whole emphasis here is either on not breaking the laws of Shabbat, and on making Shabbat a day of Torah learning and Torah study. In other words, a Litvak's paradise. This is Shabbat. But how about the rest of us? So now I'm going to ask Ian to unmute, if you can. Hopefully we'll be safe from interference. And can you read, please, from line 3, by contrast?
By contrast, the Zohar concentrates on the sacred mystical side to Shabbat and uses quite a dramatic hypostasis in order to infuse the mundane activities of eating, drinking, wearing fine garments, and sexual relations with high sephirotic significance.
Very good. So, what we do in the Zohar, we do almost the exact opposite. Take the eating and the drinking and the sexual relations and the fine clothes. They are the key to appreciating Shabbat. They are not simply red herrings, things that are there to give you some starting point for higher philosophical thoughts. They are the very stuff out of which the greatness of Shabbat is made. The Sephirotic scheme. Ian.
The Sephirotic scheme underlying Shabbat is a complex one, but its central idea is one of unity in both the upper and the lower worlds, and the cessation of the power of harsh din in the world on Shabbat. In creating this highly original approach to Shabbat, the Zohar, as always, bases itself upon Talmudic materials, and in particular the idea of the Neshama Yetera, the extra soul that is received on Shabbat.
Okay, so the Zohar is going to tell us that the greatness of Shabbat lies davka in eating, in drinking, in, as I said, sexual relations, in fine clothes, and in doing these with your thoughts connected to the Sefirot. Now, as I've said on many occasions, the whole world of Sefirot can be traced to a Neoplatonic idea. But if you believe in it, if you accept the fact that God is a complex entity flowing down from the Ein Sof through many different Sefirot to us human beings and enriching us, and there is a relationship between the upper realm, Platonic ideas, and the lower realm where we live, then you have an amazing world, and Shabbat is one of the most powerful ideas in the Zohar. So much of the Zohar is devoted to Shabbat. Shabbat becomes the gem, the precious jewel in the crown of Judaism, and this makes us all into amazing human beings who will control and bring about unity in the world of Sefirot and bode for a better world all round. Now, the Neshama Yetera has a special part here, okay? The extra soul is received on Shabbat. The source, Ian, the source of the idea.
Source of the idea of the Neshama Yetera is in the Talmud.
Now, the nice thing about the Zohar, and what we're trying to do as well, is to see the Zohar takes its basic building blocks from the Talmud, from the Midrash, but it works them up to something far more, I would dare to say, than the sages of the Talmud ever imagined, okay? Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish. The Gemara says, Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish says, Neshama Yetera noten HaKadosh Baruch Hu ba'adam erev Shabbat. Friday afternoon, we all get an extra soul. U'lemotzei Shabbat, but we lose it on Shnemar Shavat Vayinafash. Now you could read that Kevan Shabbat. Once you finish Shabbat, Vay Oivei Avda Nefesh, you've lost your extra soul. Vay Oivei. Okay, so the idea is that we feel special on Shabbat. Okay, we have an extra soul. Now, if I was a rationalist, I could go with Rabbi Menachem HaMeiri, famous, again, a Maimonidean rationalist living in the south of France in the 13th century. He provides a perfectly rational explanation. When you learn the Gemara, you learn the Bet HaBechira, the Meiri, וזה אצלי גם כן עניין נשמה יתרה. יש בו באדם בשבת ולמוצאי שבת, נטלה הימנו. We have an extra soul on Shabbat, it's taken away on Motzei Shabbat. אף על פי שדברים אלו נראים כדברי הוואי. Now, mark this. Mary says, this seems silly. What do you mean you have an extra soul? We have one soul. It controls us, gives us the ability to be human beings. What do you mean an extra? What's an extra soul? It's a silly idea. But, says the Meiri, if you understand them rationally, then, a bit like the Meiri says that the Simanim on Rosh Hashanah are again not omens. They make you think about overcoming your own evil inclination. When you say, Son'enu va'oivenu yistalku selek, it means the Yetzer Hara. You want to make yourself into a better person. So he says that Neshama Yetera means shekvar yadata shenefesh ha'adam im heota achat techalek el gimel chalakim. Following Aristotle, we divide the soul into three parts: the hemat somachat, ha'iyunit v'hamaskelet. That is the vegetable soul, the appetitive soul, and the intellectual soul. Aval Shabbat, the otom yuchal Hashem me'ein penoto bidvarim gashmiyim. On Shabbat, when we're not involved in physical things, not really concerned to eat, drink, be merry, have sexual relations, az gadal yoter koach ha'iyuni. We spend Shabbat in learning, in intellectual pursuits. Nefesh hamasakelet. So nefesh yetera is the extra power given to our intellectual souls. Again, the Litvak's paradise, that's where we could live. But the Zohar has something else entirely. So, who do we have next? Ian, you read, right?
I just wanted to say there must be some, there's a lot to be said for the feel-good factor. If that,
well, that's what,
that's
right. That's what we are going to do. Walter Rosenbaum. Wow. Hi, Walter. If you're there. Okay. So let us go back in the Zohar, however. Would anyone else like to read? Deb, would you like to read? No. Okay. So anybody else like to read? Let me go down here. In the Zohar, however. So let's go back to where we began. Bernard, I can see you if you can unmute. 19. Ah, Mickey, can people unmute?
Okay, can you hear me?
Okay.
In the Zohar, however, the Neshama Yetera is connected to Sefirot as follows. The Shekhinah is also called Bat, and on Shabbat it unites with the three Sefirot of Chesed, Gevurah, and Tiferet, which are called the Avot, and they correspond to Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov.
Chesed is Abraham, Gevurah is Yitzchak, and Tiferet is Yaakov, and are represented
by the three prongs of the letter Shin. When you add Bat to Shin, you get Shabbat.
Shabbat, three prongs of the Shin, Bat. The Bat is the Shekhinah, the Avot, so Shabbat. This is a typical Zoharic move. You wouldn't believe it, but there it is. This combination
then rises in the Sephiriotic world to Bina, which is also called Hem, and which stands for Olam Haba. Hem rises up to Chochmah, which is the highest point in our world of Sephirot.
Which we can understand, only Keter is above that. Once this unification
process takes place in the upper world, its spirit descends to the lower one, and that is the Neshama Yetera, which makes Shabbat joyful, free of evil, and infuses the mundane acts of eating 3 meals, drinking, dressing well, and sexual relations with the highest level of spirituality. After Shabbat, traces of this spirit remain and influence the rest of the week.
So there we are. Imagine the power you feel when you're keeping a Kabbalistic Shabbat as opposed to a Misnagdish one. Okay? You are, every single thing you do, the most mundane, even breathing, I guess, is somehow influencing Sfirot, and you're making a better world, and you're striving. The one day that you can unify the Shekhinah and the Sfirot is Shabbat. Everything you do. Let's read it in the Zohar. Ma'u Shabbat. What's Shabbat? Itay begin Shvita. If you say it's a day of rest, Dichtiv Kivo Shabbat. Yeah, or two. Okay, that's fine. You don't need to do anymore. You can be an average common or garden Jew, and you can believe that Shabbat is a day of rest. Aval Raza de Milah. But if you want to enter into the secret world of the Zohar, Kevan de Salka Hai Nukuda, when the Shekhinah starts to move, Kedain mitatra ihi ba'avahan, and the Shekhinah then is decorated with the 3 avot, Chesed, Gvurah, and Tiferet. Kedain itchabart v'itchadat v'hu lemehev ichad, and then becomes unified with them. Shabbat is the day of unity. Vikre kala Shabbat. Shabbat is called a kala. Shin bat. Shin ha'ukmuha raza diklat avahan. The 3 prongs of Shin are the 3 fathers. Chesed, Gvurah, Tiferet. Demit achtam bebat yichida. And then they unite with the one daughter. Shekhinah is called Bat. Okay, often as a daughter. There's a whole lot of Zohar on that. V'ihi mitatra behu. V'inun ba'al madati. And that is in the upper world. V'chula ihu chad. They're all joyful. V'da ihi Shabbat emahave kol achad. It's the unity of the Shekhinah and the 3 basic Sfirot that creates the joy of unity, and this can save the world. V'chad avahan mitatrin leila v'go nekuda ilah ikre Shabbat. Nekuda tata kad mitatra ba'avahan ikre Shabbat. And when you have the leila, and then it is impacted on the tata, the upper and the lower, wow, it's all wow. Then joy reigns right through the upper levels and the lower levels. And all the world is full of joy. Gudufai, remember, were wings. So this unity spreads its wings over the entire world. And all the evil demons, all the spirits, all the servants of the Sitra Achra are rendered powerless and impotent. V'natiru ishtakach al alma. And the whole world is protected, noter, and guarded from the evil. Uchedein itvasif. Rucha. Let's turn over. A second. Okay. Uchedein itvasif. Rucha. B'Yisrael al kol chad v'chad. And every Israelite now has this special neshama yetera, rucha nishmata. Uvahi nishmata yetera nashyan kol itzva v'chimta. And as soon as that soul descends, all sadness and all anger disappears. Think about it. Friday night, we come, suddenly we're relaxed. We ought to be people who are full of joy, happiness. It's a whole different world we enter. It's feeling of Shabbat. Nobody is outside of this special joy. Think about a Hasidish shul, shtibel, yeshiva. They all greet each other, a good Shabbos or a good Shabbos. Everybody starts to sing. That's the feeling of Shabbos. Hahu rucha denachit vitvasef b'vnei alma. Kad nachit itchasi bebusmin ginta de eden. Now this is the spirit which carries the fragrance of the Garden of Eden. Not a Zohar about Yitzchak smelling the garment that Yaakov wore, and he said, Re'ei reach hasadeh, gereach b'ni. Zohar makes the reach of the sadeh, okay, Esau's field, into a field of apples which are etrogim, the smell of the Garden of Eden, okay? V'nachit v'shara al ama kadisha. The holy people now is enveloped in the special spirit. Zakain inun kad hayrucha itaar. Ahishata dahu rucha nachit. Nachtinan ama legoy ginta de Eden. We are all embraced by the spirit of the Garden of Eden. Shitin retichin mitatrin leshit sitrin. 60 chariots decorate the 6 sides. 6 sides, they are 6 of these sfirot. Uchad mati leginta de Eden keden kol inun ruchin ishmatin de ginta de Eden. Kulu mitatri, and Zohar is very repetitive. Kulu mitatri lahahu rucha ucharuze kari v'amar. Then a voice comes out of heaven and says, Zakaina tun Yisrael ama kadisha. You have merited, Israel, the holy people, the ravata damarichon, that the will of your master, it atar legabaychu, has now descended upon you. Raza de razin leida chokmata, the secret of secrets that knows wisdom, chokma zakaini nun kad hayrucha itaar. And so we continue with the idea of shmirah, v'shamru v'nei Israel et hashabbat. Now this shmirah, it doesn't say v'shamru et shabbat, ela hashabbat. So that is the shmirah, the protection from the evil spirits, from the side of the Sitra Achra. We're all better people, or meant to be better people, on Shabbat. And this is the actual neshama yetera at work. Okay? So for the Zohar, it is a real thing. And we have to feel, and we do feel, the spirit of the Garden of Eden resting upon us, the shmirah, the guardianship from all of the Sitra Achra, the evil things. On Shabbat, we rise up above our troubles, our sorrows, and for a whole day, 24 hours or 25 hours, we are suddenly different beings. So the Zohar gives us a tremendously powerful phenomenology of Shabbat. Doesn't mention the Yisro Melacha, doesn't go into how much wine you need to put in a cup for Kiddush, doesn't tell you what you can turn on, what you can turn off. It wants you to think of yourself as a key player in producing a perfect world. You can see how powerful an idea this is. And I'm going to read and translate the bolded bit from line 19. V'alda ba'ila angale, and in order to feed the neshama yitera, which is a mood, which is an approach, you have to feed it with michla uvemishtaya, food and drink, v'levushe yakar, and fine clothes, uvechedva dekola, and joy in all of them. You have to enjoy your food, enjoy your drink, knock back elachayim every 10 minutes, keep the vodka flowing, okay? You've got to be able to get into this joy of Shabbat, and it infuses everything, okay? It's a real thing. It's not just there to make the Shabbat day pleasant enough for you to sit and learn. No, it is the end. This is what Shabbat is all about. Eating, drinking, and the 3 meals, of course, are a progression. Shalosh Shudas, Sudash Shishit, is the apex Shabbat experience. So the Hasidim get together and they are with their Rebbe and they eat and they drink and they become ecstatic. This is Shabbat in the Kabbalah. This is a Zoharic Shabbat. V'chad mitatra haichul kalatata ve'itnatir kama de'itzterich. And when this protection comes to its fruition, salka la'ela, that spirit rises up, v'itchabra bahu chul ka'achra, and it connects with the spirot up above, v'hai nukuda natil kola me'ela v'tata. And the spirit takes everything from below and above, v'it kalila mikol sitrin, and combines all the sides. Uvegim demitatra b'shabbat me'ela mitata, and it also provides inspiration for the rest of the days of the week. And the Sitra Achra is broken. Overrazin the Sifra de Shalma Malka, which is Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, Ishtakach Razada, Bukmei Butsina Kadisha. Butsina is a light. We have a holy light developing. Zakah Holkehon d'Israel. And Israel receives such a tremendously fine and powerful merit. So this is a lot of the spirit of the Shabbat in the Zohar, and you can see, and what I've been trying to do is contrast it with the rational view, what we normally do on Shabbat, how we think about Shabbat. You can imagine that if you are a follower of the Zohar, if you are a Kabbalist, then Shabbat is an amazing thing. Experientially, phenomenologically, not in the head, in the stomach, in the heart, in the psychology, in the way you relate to, what you feel as you, neshama yetera is absolutely real. It's absolutely real. And the Zohar builds it into an amazing complex and edifice for making a better world. The 3 meals, they are really important. Do not miss a single meal. Rabbi Shimon Amar, Haiman de Ishlim Tlat Sudate B'Shabta. Rashbi, Rabbi Shimon Amar says, if you have your 3 meals on Shabbat, Kalan Mafik U'Michraza Ale. Voice comes out of heaven and calls out, As Titana Gal Hashem. Now this is a pasuk from Yeshayahu, okay? Or 2 psukim, actually. Okay, Yeshayahu 58, Yud Gimel to Yud Dalet. It says, Im tashiv mi Shabbat raglecha, famous pasuk. If you will not go out on Shabbat, asot chafatzecha b'yom kodshi, you will not do what you normally do on my holy day. V'karata la Shabbat oneg. Oneg is the key to a Zoharic Shabbat. Isur melacha is the key to a halachic Litvak type Shabbat. You choose, okay? Oneg, that feeling of joy, of being transported and of having within your power to make unity between the upper and the lower worlds and to bring the world to perfection. It's a real wow, okay? Then the pasuk continues. Oneg likdosh Hashem, mechubad v'chibadato me'asod rachecha mimetzor chafetzecha v'daber davar. And that mem is like Shabbat hi milizo. You will not do the things you normally do, okay? Then az titanagal Hashem. Then you will become beloved of God. V'hirkavticha al bama te'aretz, and I will make you, the Shabbat observers, ride on the high places of the earth. V'ha'achalticha nakalat Yaakov avicha, and I will give you the inheritance of Yaakov Tiferet, your father. Ki pi Hashem diber. So what does the Zohar say? Each meal part of that pasuk. Az titanagal Hashem da sudata achada is the first meal. Lekavel atika kadisha dechol kadishin, in which we receive the Atika Kadisha, which is Sifrut Svirat Keter, okay? V'erkavticha al bamot ha'aretz, the second part of the pasuk, da sudata tinyana, is the second meal, lunch. The kavel chelka de tapuchin kadishin. If you sing the songs of the Ari, like Kinu sudata azame bishvachin, or asa deli sudata, all these phrases occur. Kahal Chakal Tapuchin. The field of the apples, by the way, is the field of Etrogim. The Etrog, according to the Zohar, is the Eitz Hadat of Gan Eden. So that's the second. V'achalticha nachalat Yaakov avicha dahu shnimu dishtalim bezir anpin. The zir anpin, or the small face, as opposed to the major face, is another configuration of Kabbalah. But that it's beyond what I really plan to go into. But you come across these configurations. But you have to complete all three. And you have to take joy in every feast. This is true faith, to eat, yes, and to drink. And as we're going to see shortly, to have sexual relations too. All of this is the epitome of holiness. It's not something that you use as a vehicle to get to something philosophical, but it is the real thing. Shabbat is superior to every other festival, every other special holy occasion. Everything that you want to make the world perfect, it is there in Shabbat. From a Sephirotic view, from a Kabbalistic view, from the Zohar's point of view. Amar Rabbi Chia, begin kach mishum dishtakach kula bei. Here says because everything is in Shabbat. Idkar telat zimnim. We mention it 3 times. 3 meals, 3 psukim. Vayechal Elohim bayom hashvi'i, vayishpot bayom hashvi'i, vayevarach Elohim et yom hashvi'i. That's your proof. Okay? Rabbi Abba, Kad hava yati v'sudat deshabta, havichad b'chol chad v'chad, havi amar, dai sudata kadisha datika kadisha stima dekola. The secret of all, these sentences we've incorporated. Those who sing the 3 songs of the Ariya Kadosh on Shabbat say these introductory lines. It's a bit like the Shem Yichud Kutsha. Okay? We're being Kabbalists. Sudata achra hava amar dahi sudata kutsha b'richu. And the last of them is the meal of the Holy One, blessed be He, the Shechina. Achen b'chuli sudate, avachad b'chol chad v'chad. Kad hava ashlim sudate, hava amar ashlimu sudate demehemanuta. And he would also announce at the end, I have finished the 3rd and final meal of faith. Rabbi Shimon kad hava ati de sudata va'ami hachi, atkinu sudata demenuta ilah. Jean, are you there?
Yes.
Do you remember Askinu Sudasa?
Yes.
Yes, so there we are. This is the place in the Zohar. So this is what Rashbi used to say to indicate that we are now bringing the unity of the worlds and of the Sefirot together. The tikkun is by the actual Sudah. You feed the neshama, yitera, physically, and that has spiritual ramifications. Then Now that verse in Yeshayahu becomes critical in the Zohar, because that's the one time in the Tanakh we read about oneg as being God's desire for us on Shabbat. Now let's read on a bit.
Kafticha was for the second meal.
Yeah, okay. Az titalagan Hashem, then v'hir kafticha, and then v'ha'achalticha nachalat Yaakov avicha. Okay? So more of this, and we go on about the Zeir Anpin and Bnei Echala. You remember Bnei Echala? The Chassidin, Jean.
Yes?
Yeah, the Chassidim would sing this at
My father,
which meal?
I tell you, I don't tell it. My father was, he knew that anything by heart.
Exactly. So Bnei Echala Dichsif in the next Ziv, the Zeir Anpin. Okay? This is pure Kabbalah. It's the highest form of Shabbat experience at the Shalashudas, at the third meal. Hence the Hasidim go to the Rebbe and they become involved in the epitome of a Kabbalistic Shabbat. I'm going to read the bold type because there's a lot here and I'm not going to unpack it all, but I'm going to say one thing. That remember we said that if you have a meal on a Chag, you have to have poor people there, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, it's considered to be a really tacky affair when you just feed yourselves and your friends. But on Shabbat, you should eat and drink, even if it's just you. You don't need to have any poor at your table, no guests, because the Shabbat is unique. It is actually a spiritual experience of the highest form, fed by an intense involvement in the physical world. So, line 17. The whole life faith, our religious faith, is experienced on Shabbat. You get an extra soul. Nishmata ilah, a higher soul. Nishmata, the whole shalemu ba, kedugma da'alma da'ati. When it is experienced in its entirety, you feel olam haba. We feel olam haba on Shabbat. We only started to feel that because of the Zohar. Otherwise, like the Meiri and Rabbi Yaakov Anatoli, we were learning. We were learning Torah. We were studying Gemara. We were looking at the Moren Nevuchim, perhaps, okay? But the Zohar taught us to enjoy Shabbat, to feel uplifted, to go into an absolute ecstatic world fueled by wine, by food, by fine clothes, by matrimonial harmony, all of this. This is the Zoharic Shabbat. Uvegine kach ikre Shabbat, mahu Shabbat, shema de kutsha berichu. This piece of Zohar says that Shabbat is God's name. And so the name of God in the terms of Shekhinah, of course. Shema de ihu shalim mikol satroi, because it is shalem. It is whole. And again, I talk about the shin and the bat, the unity. Amar Rabbi Yossi, vadai kachu, vai leila barnash de la ishlim chedvata damalka kadisha, oman chedvata delay. If you don't do that, you're not doing the right thing. You have to have your 3 meals. Ilein tlatsu datei mehemanuta, the meals of faith. Sudate de Avram, Yitzchak, v'Yakov, kililam behu. V'chulhu, chedo al chedo, mehemanuta, shleimuta, mikol sitroi. Okay. Somebody to read number Friday night, please. And that probably is when we're going to have to stop. But Friday night. Jack, would you like to read, please? Line 22. Unmute. Great. Friday night.
Friday night is a night during which a scholar is obliged to engage in conjugal relations. But the reason is practical.
In the Gemara, the reason is practical. Why Friday night? Because
Shabbat.
He is meant
to study Torah
on every other night.
Lo nivra layla ela legirsa. So you're up until 3 a.m. studying hard, learning Torah. You don't have time for sex. But on Friday night, that's when
Zohar develops deeply symbolic approach in terms of Sphirot union between Shekhinah, Malchut, and Yesod. Conjugal relations hypothesize the union between the Shekhinah, female and Friday night, and Yesod, male and Shabbat day. During the week, the Shekhinah is locked up.
Now, if you ever, did any of you know these Zemer Ya Eksof? Called Shisha Yamim Sagur. A whole song is replete with this by Rabbi Aaron HaGadol of Karlin. Do any of you know this? Ya Eksof Noam Shabbat. Ay, 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 ay. Does that sound familiar? David Citron, you're nodding your head. Okay, it's a whole Kabbalistic litany, but now you know what this particular, the whole week, Shekhinah is locked up. We don't feel it. On Shabbat, it enters our lives and is only free to receive. Jack, please.
During the week, the Shekhinah is locked up and is only free to receive its partner on Shabbat, the day of union and joy. Sexual relations on Friday night are, therefore, profoundly spiritual and rich in mystical significance.
So there we are. I'm now going to read the bit from the Zohar. Ve'azlaha kahada amar Rabbi Elazar, my dichtiv Yom Hashishi. What does it say, Yom Hashishi? Think about the first chapter of Breshit. Vayerev vayivoker Yom Echad. Vayerev vayivoker Yom Sheni. Vayerev vayivoker Yom Shlishi. Vayerev vayivoker Yom Revi'i. Vayerev vayivoker Yom Chamishi. Vayerev vayivoker Yom Hashishi. Why Hashishi? Elahachi ukmuha. Hashishi. Dizdavka bei matranute. The matron, the female side, the Shekhinah, comes to a union with the male side. That's why it's Hashishi, the special one. Okay? La takna patora lamalka, to make a table for the king. Ovagin kach ishtakhu bei trein chulkin, chad liomei v'chad letakuna. Zohar always reads ideas into a letter. So the Hay becomes the capacity of the sixth day, Friday night, to unite, which we don't have on day 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have it in Yom Hashishi. That's the Hay. We release the Shekhinah, the unity. So everything you do on Shabbat is suddenly replete with huge mystical, erotic significance. It's a whole different feel. A whole different Shabbat experience.
Yeah.
Okay? Umitbarach ha'an kol shita yomin, kol chad v'chad bilechudoi. And each of the 6 days then receives some overflow from Shabbat. Begin kach bayi barnash lesidra patore belela d'shabta. You have to set out a major banquet on Friday night. And believe me, there are some people who do put on a major banquet on Friday night. We had such an experience in Vienna in the summer, 18 first courses before the soup. Begin the Yishrei Alei Bircha'an Mila'ela, in order to get the bracha to come from above. Ubirchata lo ishtakach al patora rekanya. There's no bracha on an empty table, so pile on the food. This is the night of unity. The king and the queen come together. Okay. Begin kach talmidei chachamim diyadina razada. Talmidei chachamim who know the secret. Zavga delahon me'erev Shabbat le'erev Shabbat. Zohar chelik bet. Okay, I think that's as much as we can do because it is 10 o'clock. I will stop share. We'll continue perhaps and finish off Shabbat next time. And I want to go into other mitzvot too, to see the difference between the rational approach and the Kabbalistic approach. And this brings us back to Rav Herzog's letter, which we read a long time ago, about the Zohar. Okay? We have doubts about its authenticity, may very well not be Rashbi. If there is any Rashbi, it's a tiny proportion. But, says Rabbi Dr. Herzog, look at the difference between the cold, rational approach to Shabbat, and the warm, emotional, phenomenological, feeling approach of the Kabbalah. And if it can make our observance of mitzvot richer, more enthusiastic, happier, simply more feeling, then he says, why not? So a little bit of Kabbalah on Shabbat, a little bit of these ideas, may be something that will make our Judaism a little richer. I don't know. I leave that to you. We'll do more mitzvot, another mitzvah. Perhaps we'll look at the mezuzah next time. We have to finish Shabbat. And I want to look at Kegavna, because, you know Nusach Sfard or Hasidic Sfard. We Ashkenazim say Bameh Madikin to prepare us for Shabbat. What oil shall we use? What wick shall we? Because we don't, chas v'shalom, to be mechabeh or to turn the wick. We don't want to be mevaer. We're quite neurotic, actually, okay? Well, the Hasidim, what do they say? Kegavna de'inun, razin, raza de Shabbat, secret of Shabbat, all the sefirot and all the rugzin or mare de dina. Well, which do you prefer? Okay, now I've asked you a challenging question. You can think about it until next week. Next week in Yirtzeh Hashem, we continue. Same time, same place. Okay.
Most of the Hasidim doesn't understand what they say.
Sorry, who?
I say most of the Hasidim don't understand what means Kegavna Dei.
They haben nicht kein Musig. Exactly. Most people say it, and most people in Israel say it. Okay, Udavan Nusach Achid, they rattle off Kegavna. Ian, would you be able to translate and explain Kegavna?
Oh. As?
You have to unmute if you want us to.
Are you giving me a Masima before Eshed? I'll do it.
No, I'm not. There is no compulsion, but I'm sure.
I mean, Higia Hasman, that I did understand it. I agree. But many years I should have understood it. Yes,
many years we say it because it's not. It's in the Sidur Rinat Israel.
I don't say it. My sons-in-law say it. I say Bavme Madlikin.
You say Bavme Madlikin, which is fine. But Kegavna and so many people say it. They have no idea what they are saying. Okay. But we are going to understand it next week, okay? We're going to go through Kegavna, and then we'll move into another couple of mitzvot, and then we'll see how we go. We are beginning the end of our isuk, our occupation with the Zohar. Okay. Any more questions, comments?
I would say only that the Rambam indeed speaks for Yom Tov. He says that we must have 2 people at the table so that it is not so that kreso. But for Shabbat, he doesn't speak about
exactly.
But
and that is and that was and this is explained beautifully by the Zohar, because the Shabbat is there for us, and in the Shema Yitera we don't have it on Yom Tov. You don't have to necessarily have 3 meals. It's a different thing. Okay, so
what about
there we are.
People who are on their own on Shabbat, shouldn't they be invited? I don't know.
Yeah, but if you are on your own on Shabbat, Ian, you have to have your 3 meals. You have to enjoy it. You have to sing. You have to dance, drink as much as you can, because you have to feed your neshama yitera, because the neshama yitera is doing things in this world and in the world above. On Yom Tov, you can say, if I'm not invited, I'm not going to do a thing, okay? But Shabbat, you do have to do those things.
Have a good stock of liquor.
It's an ot, it's an ot, it's a Brit, and this is the way we make God great in the world. Shabbat, absolutely.
Need a good stock of liquor.
Doesn't mean that you shouldn't invite.
I'm just being informed that it doesn't mean that you shouldn't invite, of course. But if you are in a situation where you are not invited, which hopefully will be very rare, you still need to celebrate Shabbat with the whole shebang, the full Monty. Okay? All right.
Good.
Erev Tov.